Southern Africa's finest source of quality engineering components and expertise. BMG.
From Creamer Media in Johannesburg, this is the Real Economy Report. Our top stories this week. We look at the construction of the Seacom undersea cable. We look at South Africa's military information and communications technology sector. And we speak to the head of the South African delegation to the World Trade Organization. Christy van der Merwe takes a look at the construction of East Africa's undersea fiber optics cable.
Seacom, the first majority African-owned, open-access undersea fiber optics cable, linking Southern and East Africa to India and Europe, and bringing high-speed international broadband connectivity. Projects of this nature are notorious for encountering delays and failing to deliver on promises, but not the privately funded Seacom, which switched on only a month later than scheduled, interrupted only by pirate activity off the Somali coast. So how did it all happen? An extensive marine survey, including impact assessments, route mapping, and pre-engineering work, was done by Tyco Telecommunications and was completed by October 2007. This planning phase was instrumental as timing and logistics were key. In November 2007, Seacom and Tyco started the construction contract. 3 ships were deployed simultaneously to bury the fiber optics cable. The largest ship, starting in South Africa, was the Tyco Resolute. The ships used a dynamic positioning system to ensure the cable was laid exactly where it should be. Thousands of kilometers of cable was rolled out as the ships made their journey. Meanwhile, smaller branch cables were laid from the terminal stations on the coast, extending about 3 kilometers offshore. The large fiber-deploying ships stopped to pick up the branch cables off the sea floor and connect them to the main cable. A grappling hook was used to pick up the branch cable and bring it on board. It was then brought into the ship's laboratory, where engineers spliced it to the main cable.
Now, when you talk about splicing fiber optics, you're talking about an exact science. There can be no degradation in the signal when they're connecting these 2 pieces of glass, these 2 pieces of fiber optic. The fibers cannot even be a nanometer out of place. To do this on a moving vessel is impossible. So you have to keep the Tyco Resolute completely stationary while the engineers are doing the splicing work.
The newly spliced cable was then carefully lowered into the sea by the crew. Once there was one continuous system that was integrated with the global fiber network, it was time for testing to ensure optimum configuration and traffic flow. And finally, switch on, which happened on July 23rd. Terrestrial networks have been rolled out in most of the countries connected, extending the fiber optics inland. It is hoped that the cable's arrival will signal lower broadband prices and open up untold opportunities in healthcare, education, business, governance, and conservation.
Military information and communications technology forms an important element in South Africa's defence industry. Its showcase is the biennial Military Information and Communications Symposium of South Africa. Keith Campbell reports after the break.
Southern Africa's finest source of quality engineering components and expertise. BMG.
One of the co-chairpersons of last month's Mixer and Department of Defense Government Information Technology Officer, Air Force Major General Mario Brazzoli, gives us an overview of South Africa's defense ICT sector.
ICT is well developed in South Africa because of the close association we have with the rest of the world. So the international sphere of ICT basically imposes upon yourself to be up and ahead with them to be able to produce results. So the state-wise and the state-wise initiatives that we've got in the country are starting to move towards the leading edge. Obviously, within different organizations like the military, we do not believe in using the leading edge type of technology, but more mature technology is required to be able to make sure that everything is in position and everything signed and sorted out. The important factor to remember here is that you don't want to run the latest application on a system which has not been tried and tested throughout the world. As you will know, in private environment, when you've got your own applications which you are putting onto your own PC. One looks at the products that South Africa produce as far as information and communication technology, and specific reference to the communications environment, to which we've got industries in South Africa that physically manufacture equipment which is utilized within the Department of Defense, but also utilized and exported to other African countries and even to other countries around the world. I'd like to refer you to the MIXA 2009, which was held in July, and if we could explain to you that MIXA has grown through the years from when it started off in 2003, and the interest that we are having from international companies around the world to come and explain to us and share with us the latest technologies, and also the South African participation during MIXA 2009 indicated that we are up there with the top people.
The World Trade Organization holds its first ministerial conference since the Hong Kong meeting in 2005 in Geneva in November. Christy van der Merwe asks Faisal Ismail, head of the South African delegation to the WTO, what we can expect from the conference.
There is increasing pressure to conclude the Doha development round of world trade negotiations. Focused on reforming and liberalizing the multilateral trade system, the Doha round has emphasis on ensuring that developing countries secure a fair share of the growth in world trade. Under discussion since 2001, complicated tariffs and subsidies are scrutinized. The areas of agriculture and industrial products have proved the major sticking points of the negotiations. Can we expect Doha to top the agenda at November's ministerial meeting?
The members are very concerned at this stage to ensure that there are no unrealistic expectations of the conference. However, we will also be reviewing the progress that we have made thus far on the Doha round. But at this stage, there is no clarity about whether we will be able to make any significant progress on the Doha round by the time of the conference.
Focus at the conference could be on reform within the WTO to make it more efficient.
There has been a lot of criticism about the decision-making process in the WTO. Many NGOs and developing countries feel that the decision-making is untransparent, and so it is hoped that in the future we will resist the temptation to meet in small groups, but we will try to develop more inclusive ways of making decisions in the WTO. Reforms are also in the decision making are also only going to be possible if the countries in the WTO who are concerned about democracy and about their participation are actively engaged in the process of demanding their right to participate and organizing themselves in ways that will ensure that they are not excluded and that they can't be excluded. And indeed this has happened. We now have a proliferation of groups in the WTO that represent different constituencies. It is hoped that as we go forward, these groups could become much more active and could become much more a part of the new architecture of decision making.
And now for a sneak preview of this week's Engineering News magazine. A state nuclear company aims to assist in the building of a local nuclear industry to create jobs, improve skills, and have a beneficial impact on South African industry. Read how South Korea's Hyundai Motor Company has edged out Ford to become the fourth biggest automaker in the world. And read of US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton describing South Africa as one of the most important emerging economies in the world today. And in Mining Weekly this week, read our cover story about how Zimbabwe's new Minister of Mines is impatient to get the country's mining on the go again. We report that Xstrata Coal South Africa is transitioning to a sophisticated, low-cost, open-cast coal business. And read how platinum miner Northam Platinum managed to stay in the money despite tough economic conditions. That's Creamer Media's Real Economy Report. Join us again next week for more news and insight into South Africa's real economy.
Engineering news, not just for engineers.